Good morning, and today I break my promise because I'm going to do one more talk on meditations on progress. Because there is something in Ecclesiastes which I've hinted at, but which I want to look square in the eye today, and that is the idea that there is nothing new under the sun. Well, that's obviously quite relevant if we're talking about progress. So I'm going to read the key passage, the beginning of Ecclesiastes, chapter 1, verse 3 onwards. What do people gain from all their labours, at which they toil under the sun? Generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun sets and hurries back to where it rises. The wind blows to the south and turns to the north. Round and round it goes, ever returning on its course. All streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place the streams come from, there they return again. All things are wearisome, more than one can say. The eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear its fill of hearing. What has been will be again, what has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which one can say, look, this is something new. It was here already long ago. It was here before our time. No one remembers the former generations. Even those yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow them. So this passage in Ecclesiastes is saying there is nothing new. But it seems, if you look around us, that everything is new. I live in central London, and the skills which would have been essential here 1,000 years ago would be useless to me now. The skills of agriculture and hunting, animal husbandry and boat skills and fishing, which would have been useful here, no use to me now. My environment is artificial. I live in a brick house which stands on a tarmac road. My house has lots of electrical and electronic gadgets which I have to maintain and try to fix. My house is full of cheap, mass-produced books, any one of which would have been a year's labour for a dedicated man 1,000 years ago. In fact, my life is full of cheap, mass-produced everything. My life is ruled by technology and techniques which are all modern. Everything is new. And yet Ecclesiastes is a book really ruled by the question in verse 3 that I just read. What do people gain from all their labours at which they toil under the sun? And what he's saying there is that because there's nothing really new, most of our activities are not achievements. The world rolls on regardless. We can try any sort of method or matter of organisation to change things, but generally those methods will fail, and you can't predict which of your projects might even succeed. So Ecclesiastes seems to be saying that meaningful progress may not even be possible. Now, I want to point out that nearly all of the differences that I've pointed out between modern and ancient life are meaningless differences. They're not as important as they seem. People have always been enslaved by the current technology. 1,000 years ago, almost, we were invaded by the Normans. And Britons were enslaved by the Normans, using new technology, the technology of armoured cavalry, high-grade steel weapons, and castle building. And so when the peasant tried to revolt against his Norman overlord, even though the Brits outnumbered the Normans 1,000 to 1, they lost the war. Roughly that time, a Norman knight named Roger conquered the whole of Sicily with 22 companion knights. The Normans were geniuses, at pragmatically using the new technology. And the church helped. The church helped to keep us all under control. They built those miraculous, huge and heavy buildings, the great cathedrals of England, built supposedly for the glory of God, but also built to prove that God was on the side of the invaders. The techniques of priestcraft practiced in those buildings kept our ancestors in their places. Fast forward to today, and there are many countries in the world that look like feudal states to me. China is a feudal state. The ruling class of knights is the Chinese Communist Party. They use different weapons, they use different religions. In fact, their religion doesn't even have a god. But they have their dead saints, like Chairman Mao and his companions on the Long March, and Marx and Lenin and people like that. You and I could probably spend an interesting day coming up with all the comparisons between modern Chinese feudalism and ancient Norman feudalism. And even today in Britain, the great wealth of Britain is being siphoned off and accumulated by different methods, complicated financial schemes, but the looting is not that dissimilar from the looting by the Normans. William the Bastard, the proper name of the conqueror, would recognise in some detail, I think, the method of our winner-takes-all culture today. He was a winner-takes-all man. We once had an aristocracy which spoke French. Now the aristocrats speak the language of management gobbledygook, which doesn't feel like progress. The priesthood once tended to the holy relics and the mysteries of the Mass. Now the priesthood serves scalable networks and financial engineering. So everything's different, but everything's the same. We've been surprised by the crude and brutal racism in Minneapolis this week. But black Americans say that's nothing new. And vicious ethnic rivalries have been around for far too long. The new element of the pseudoscience of racism, which is completely bogus, is not that different from the mythology that said the Greeks were a different kind of human being from the barbarians, or the difference between high-born and low-born, a superstition which has kept many aristocracies in place, and so on. The details differ, but the same foolishness goes on. Our status symbols are different. No one boasts about his armour and his warhorse, but he might boast about his Learjet. The pilgrimage to Rome is no longer a status symbol, but the private box at La Scala in Milan certainly is. The things are different, but they serve the same purpose of saying, I'm superior to you. Now today I feel very modern, because I'm talking to a little black rectangle, and on that black rectangle I can see a mirror image of myself, which is almost as good as the mirror image I might have got from a Roman mirror from 2,000 years ago. But I feel very modern. I'm going to take a recording which I'm going to mess about with on another square black machine, and which I will upload to YouTube, and within a few hours people on different continents will perhaps be paying attention to what I'm trying to say here. How modern is that? But the content of this talk is really no different from the essays of Montaigne or the letters of St. Peter. The only difference is in lower quality in terms of what I'm doing as to what Montaigne and the Apostle Peter were doing. It's all different, but it's all the same. It's someone sending a message to other people trying to make some kind of point. At the end, this may sound a bit defeatist. Am I saying progress is impossible? Almost, but not quite. There is such a thing as grace in the world. God has not left his creation alone. There's a wonderful little bit in Daniel chapter 7, the prophecy of the four beasts, and the first beast is the beast of Babylon. Daniel says, the first beast was like a lion, it had the wings of an eagle. I watched until its wings were torn off and it was lifted from the ground so that it stood on 2 feet like a human being, and the mind of a human was given to it. The 4 ravening beasts of Daniel are the models for the great beast of Revelation, the successive empires of Babylon, Persia, Macedonia and Rome. But the first empire was humanized according to this. The wings were taken off, it was lifted up, put on its 2 hind feet, and the mind of a human being given to it, a humane mind. And of course that was the humanizing influence of Daniel and his companions, and the effect it had on Nebuchadnezzar. Yes, occasionally real change is truly possible. Something similar happened to Europe when I was a boy. Europe has been the darkest of dark continents, the source of so much evil and wickedness. The imperial projects of the European powers, and then the way they turned on each other, using the methods they'd used to enslave other people to ruin themselves twice over in the 20th century. But then, probably out of exhaustion, there was an improvement in the 1950s and 60s, a kind of renunciation of the arrogance and the abuses that happened before. It was almost like Europe had had its wings taken off and been set on its hind feet and given the mind of a man. How long that will last, I don't know, but I'm glad I lived in that period of time. But of course, after the Babylonians come the Persians, the Greeks and the Romans. So even when there is progress, it may not be forever. So really we just have to serve the Lord in our days. We have to pray and work for better days now. There is grace. God is still there. And even if our prayers are saved up until the end, our labour in the Lord is not in vain. But nevertheless, there is nothing new under the sun, and we shouldn't be surprised if our simplistic hopes for improvement don't get very far. I hope that's not too depressing, because actually I think hope lies in realism. And in the meantime, God bless you and keep you. Bye for now.